Hey guys, welcome to another episode of The Racing Business. Actually, it's Drag Illustrated's The Racing Business with Jason Dukes. I'm your host, Jason Dukes. Today, super interested to have another phenomenal guest. And again, one of the purposes of the show is to have a racing business conversation, but really from the point of listening to people's journey within the business and how it's all transpired so that, we could all explore together and learn some stuff together and really have an entertaining an interesting hour or however long the conversation goes. The guest this week is Sarah Lassek of Pertronics. She is the chief brand officer of Pertronics. And so Pertronics are brands, I have them listed here, but Pertronics Ignition, Taylor Cables, JBA Exhaust, the original Doug's Headers, Patriot Exhaust, VW and motorcycle brand Compufier, and also motorcycle brand Spike, along with Aeromotive. Actually, I guess another way that you can say Pertronics is the Aeromotive group. Wanted to have Sarah on the show because she has a super interesting background, but also from the racing business side of it. Companies like Pertronics right now are one of the things where they're major holding companies that have a bunch of different brands that you knew, brands that started out as family businesses and things like that, and now are conglomerates and operating that way. So super interesting conversation that we're going to have. Sarah has a super interesting journey into motorsports that we're going to discover together. I'm going to learn along with you guys. So wanted to bring in the chief brand officer at Pertronics, Sarah Lassek. How are you, Sarah?
I'm good, Jason. Thank you so much for having me. I'm really excited to be here to talk to you.
You're welcome. I'm glad to have you too. I went through, it's funny, I wrote some notes down beforehand and wrote down all the different brands of Pertronics and almost forgot Aeromotive. And it was like, no, like one.
There's a lot.
Yeah, there's a lot. Well, just anything that I missed just on the introduction of where you are right now, because once we start the interview, we're going to start at the beginning of Sarah and move on up. But just so that the viewers who are tuning in know where you are right now, anything that I missed about your current position?
No, you got it. So, just to kind of build on the name, we were the Pertronics Performance Brands, but just to keep things interesting, we just changed our company name to the Aeromotive Group. So if people are like, wait, I thought you were Pertronics, now we are the Aeromotive Group. So, but yeah, 9 brands in total. Waterman is the only other one, but it's a lot. It's a lot to keep track of.
Gotcha. And when, for just a timestamp on that, when did that change happen to Aeromotive Group?
About 3 weeks ago. So very recently. And, for us, Pertronics was kind of a bit of a confusing name. And it didn't roll off the tongue. And for us, Aeromotive is truly the gem and really our most premium brand that stands for quality, performance, innovation. And so it felt more appropriate to really house the portfolio of brands. So we made the leap.
Awesome. So Tell us about Sarah. Where did Sarah begin? Because we pretty much all of our guests, it's either a super interesting way that they got into motorsports or that they were already in motorsports, and there's a super interesting way that they stayed in and all that. So tell us, like, just general, like, Sarah's a baby. Like, who was Sarah?
Well, oddly, I have always been car obsessed, and I don't know why. I didn't grow up with a father that worked on cars. I don't have brothers. I guess the closest thing is I grew up as a tomboy and, always was hanging out with guy friends, putting engines in their cars. And, I have an essay that my mom found that I wrote when I was in 4th grade called Cars. And so there was something, don't know why, but I have just been obsessed with them from a very early age.
Yeah, and so we talked about an interesting background or interesting journey to racing. Cars were not your only not your only passion. What were some of the other things that you were interested in?
Yeah, I mean, I sort of have 3 loves and passions as a child, and then growing up through high school and college. And cars were one, fashion was the other, and then I was a competitive swimmer. And when I realized that my dreams of being an Olympian were not going to happen, I was then between fashion and cars. And as a woman too, not just as a woman, but you just don't really know, I wasn't sure how I would, like, I don't know how I would get into the car world. I kind of, in my mind, you'd either be a pro driver, maybe a journalist. I just didn't know enough about it. I just knew that I loved them, and I was a adrenaline junkie, and I crashed a couple cars and, kept buying and selling cars. But I didn't know what to do with it in terms of a career. So I ended up I graduated undergrad with a business degree in finance, and then ended up going into the fashion industry kind of after a stint working at Neiman Marcus, and then went kind of, again, it sort of went like this, and ended up going through the finance industry for a little bit, and then, long story short, ended up in fashion. And so that
Okay. Well, actually, let's hang on, because we're actually gonna make this long story long, because there's so many good things in here.
Okay.
We won't necessarily go into age specifically, but you talked about growing up and as a woman and racing and stuff like that, and a lot of time, and I mean, I get some of that too, just as a Black dude. I'm 44 years old, and so things have evolved greatly over time, right? Like in the early 80s, 90s, or whatever. Like, as a Black dude trying to get into racing is a lot different than in the year 2023.
Yeah.
Like, what you speak of that. Like, what was the landscape, or what was your experience as a as a child, teenager, young adult, as a woman in cars?
I mean, again, I sort of would try to read everything I could, again, would just do everything and that I could get my hands on. Again, I'd sit there and watch friends, build cars. And it probably wasn't until came back to LA, and I was working in banking, that I started to really get immersed in, like, car culture and car world, and, started to realize, like, what LA, the incredible car culture that is here. And so I started to do track days. Which of course is so intimidating, because you go out in your car and, I'm like, everyone's got all their stuff, and you just drive out and you're like,
Right.
what I was doing. But I was like, I love driving fast and I want to learn about this. And I just kind of kept consuming information on cars and would try to meet as many people as I could. But just, it's any group event. I would do, private coaching and M schools out at Thermal, and I'm always the only woman. I was always mostly the only woman when I went to, like, Danny McKeever's, racing school out at Willow Springs. And you kind of just have to suck it up and go and do it for the love. And once you get in there, you realize, like, okay, we're all here from the commonality, and, most of them, I mean, this is just, it's kind of the way it goes. Once you prove yourself, you can outdrive many of them. Then they're like, oh, okay, she's fine, she can hang. Or you can talk the talk, it's fine. But it's intimidating. It's definitely intimidating. And it took, again, I didn't have the confidence to really pursue it as a full-time career. So I just kept trying to spend as much time in and around cars and car people that I could, as kind of a hobby.
Yeah. Talk a little bit about swimming, and the reality of swimming, the matureness that you had to have at a pretty young age to make some of the decisions that you made around swimming.
Yeah, I mean, swimming is still a big part of my life. I still do it as many days a week as I can. But, my parents kind of threw me in the pool when I was probably 4 years old, literally and figuratively. And I loved it. And I was competing and working out, doubles every day, pretty much through high school. Would swim year round. And it's kind of one of the, like any competitive sport, and you have to make a decision. And at the time I was so burnt because I had been doing it for so long. And the decision was, do I want to go to college and swim, or do I want to go and enjoy college, as the college experience? And I pooped out and I quit, which, there's days where I'm like, could I have gone to trials? Could I have, cause I was a really competitive swimmer, but it just kind of was taking over. And I'm wondering now if I would love it as much as I do if I had stuck with it all the way through college.
Yeah. And I know that I said we're going to try and make things, like, go through it slowly, but I want to just skip to the racing life pretty quickly. Like, how many of the lessons that you learned is swimming, and making that decision of, like, look, this is the balance that I want to have in my life. How does that, figure or fit into your life now with motorsports? Because sometimes motorsports can be all encompassing.
Yeah. It's, it's interesting in this. I would say the same about fashion, because cars and motorsport have been such a passion of mine for so long that there's a bit of a fear of ruining it as I turn it into a career. So I did that with fashion and, was in, fashion for 20 years while also dabbling in motorsport and cars. But it's like one of those things I'm like, okay, the swimming thing, I'm like, you stopped doing the thing that you love. And it's right. There's such a physicality to it too. But I pushed myself to really switch gears, pun intended, right, to get into automotive and motorsport as a career, because I'm like, this is the thing that I have loved from the time I was tiny. And there is a lot of fear involved, and there's a lot of unknowns, and the job that kind of did my hard left into it was a job I could not have even written a job description for, and it was the weirdest job ever, but it really kind of full time allowed me to be in this industry that I love. So the previous times leading up were me kind of carving my own path, more so just getting myself on track, getting myself, in the car community, being on boards with the Peterson, trying to just learn as much as I could. And then at some point you just have to like make the decision. And right. I guess that's where the sort of competitive athlete comes back, because you're like, I am not losing. It's kind of ingrained that you're like, I'm going to keep doing this, whether it kills me or not.
So let's start back at the beginning, or probably the middle here, with the first finance job, and then talk about that, but then also parallel the racing either on the side or however the racing life was happening.
Yeah, I mean, when I graduated from SMU in Dallas, and so graduated, and they sent me to LA to do corporate banking, which was quite possibly one of the most boring jobs you could imagine. It's as bad as it sounds. So I did not last all that long. I mean, I love the strategy piece of it, but it was just basically grinding, reading annual reports and grinding numbers. And so I ended up working at Sony for a few years. That was kind of a pivotal change in my skill set, to more sponsorship, partnership, business development, strategy, marketing, that kind of a thing. Which is
what side of Sony? Because I know Sony is one of these huge.
Massive. Yeah. It was a new division called Sony Development, and we were tasked with building an entertainment center up in San Francisco called Metreon. And it exists still, but it exists in a much different way than it used to. And essentially I would fly up to San Francisco and be up there 4 days a week, and we would go around, like, it was business development. So we were trying to fill restaurant spaces, retail kiosks. We spent a lot of time like eating out and testing food, and then negotiating with big sponsors to be, so you'd have like an automotive sponsor, you'd have a beverage sponsor, you'd have, these different sponsors that come in. There was retail, there were live interactive exhibits. It was kind of probably before its time. So we had a Where the Wild Things Are exhibit. We had an interactive Microsoft store and gaming kind of room where we developed the games from scratch. Again, I think we sort of were too soon to the market. This would have been, I'm going to age myself, but this would have been in 98, something like that. So like, pretty early on for these like interactive,
right.
cross team gaming, but it was really great. And I had great mentors that I still to this day respect and love, who really kind of, again, put me out into a space that I was probably not totally ready for and were experienced enough for, but they're like, go do it. And we just had an incredible experience building that.
Well, actually, too, I think an interesting thing maybe for some of the younger people listening, or people younger than us, one of the reasons why they probably put you in that position was because it was so ahead of its time and experimental. Any connection to that, and any advice that you have for some of the younger folks listening to the show, like just with that experience?
Yeah, I think that again, I feel very lucky that the woman who was my boss and my mentor, like, I felt supported. That's not always the case, but she believed in me and allowed me to take some of these projects on, and wasn't, if I made a mistake or I failed or whatever, she was not afraid for that to happen. And I think you really have to trust yourself too. And it's hard sometimes. Little voices are in there going, I don't know what I'm doing, but I still do that. So it's, you really just have to trust yourself and know that there's probably something about that. There's a reason why this person has given you this responsibility, and you can fail. And I think that's part of what we are also afraid. And with, I think social media and everything that's put out into the universe is like perfection. You have to be perfect. You have to be shiny. You have to be on. You have to be perfect all the time. You can't fail. And that's just not part of your career journey or life journey, right? So I think it's, it's hard. It can be really hard to get to be that confident sometimes and trust. There were so many days where I wasn't, but you kind of get in your groove, and then you feel, okay, I'm going to do this. So
gotcha. So that's one big name. We have Sony on the board, and then you go from that into fashion, where there's a list of big names that you have there. Can you sort of just take us through each?
Yeah. What was my first? I was working for a company called St. John, which is a high-end designer knitwear brand based here in Orange County. And then I had the itch to move to New York, because I feel like everyone should live in New York. It's a little different now, but I was like, everyone should live in New York once in their life. It's a character building experience, and in fashion, it's like you have to live in New York, And so I moved there and worked for a company called BCBG. So they did everything from ready to wear to handbags to footwear to swimwear. It was kind of all over, global brand. I was there for a couple of years and missed the California sun and my car, because it's a totally different thing. And I'm like, I miss having a car. It really was part of that. So
what was your subway in New York?
What was I was on the F.
On the F.
So I lived Lower East Side, and this was like pre what Lower East Side is now. There's no Trader Joe's then. There was only the Chelsea Whole Foods, and there was none of the creature comforts. I'm like, you people have it good now, because we don't have any of this stuff.
Well, if they could afford to live there anymore, but yeah,
it's crazy. No way. So then I moved back also with BCBG, came back to LA and stayed with them for a few years. And my journey throughout, I then moved into denim and worked for a brand called Seven for All Mankind, and True Religion. And then, there's a few other brands in here. And then my last apparel job was with Adidas. So we ended up moving up to Portland in 2016. And that was kind of a big pinnacle move, big brands, and really incredible, like global experience working for that brand, which, totally next level from, the brands that I worked for here were great. But it's on a different level when you're working with the Nikes and the Adidases of the world. So yeah.
Well, before we get to the Adidas, can you just tell us some of the projects or things that you worked on in some of those other fashion brands? Like, what was the scope of a lot of the work that you did?
Yeah, when I started out on the sales side. So I was on sales teams, and then became, started to build them. And really, one of my passions really is mentoring and developing teams and people. And maybe that's because I had such a great mentor in a couple of places, and I feel very passionate about that. And so that really was my initial kind of foothold in the industry, but then it morphed into more merchandising and product, and then overarching like strategy. So for a business unit strategy and working across the design, product, and sales teams. But it's when I know what I missed was Tom's. Of course, so Tom's was a big one, and is actually part of the journey why I am where I am today. So that we had a really big team, and that was a really special, it's probably one of the hardest jobs I've ever had, but a really special project in terms of assessing talent, looking at the teams, mentoring people. The time that the company, the company was in a little bit of a kind of a downturn. So working everyone through that. So it was really despite everything, no matter what your job description is or what my job description is, it really comes down to the people, and it comes down to the people that you work with and the teams that you try to help and the people that you mentor. And so like that to me is the legacy. Yes, I'd love to leave any brand in a better place than I found it, but ultimately that means
The people.
you've done something right by the people.
Right. So then tell us about Sony.
The people at Sony?
Oh, I'm sorry. Wait, no, we're at Adidas now.
Oh, okay, at Adidas.
Yeah.
I was like, which one? I know.
Yeah. Well, I mean, you could also take it wherever you want to go, but I think we're up to Adidas. And actually, how do you pronounce it? Because I'm down here in South Florida now, so we have like Messi Mania, and I listen to like the Europeans, and so where they call it like Adidas or something like that. But
it is technically Adidas. Because the founder is Adi Dassler, was the man who founded it. But when I went there, I was like, you're going to only pronounce it as Adidas. You are not going to be the loser American that goes in there and totally butchers this. And what I found is every American just said Adidas. All of the Brits or the Aussies or the Germans, that was Adidas. So the pressure, when you could either way, but the pressure was off.
Yeah. So tell us about your time at Adidas.
So it was we moved up to Portland in 2016, which is a big change from Los Angeles in itself. But so Nike their headquarters are up there. So people are like, why is Adidas in Portland? It's because back in the day, if anyone wants to read Sneaker Wars, it's a great book, but it explains why Adidas is up there next to Nike.
Actually, so what is the name of the book? I've not read it.
Yeah, Sneaker Wars. Yeah, and it's all about the kind of the growth of those big brands and sneaker culture, and a little bit like it taps into what was the Air, the movie that just was up on Netflix. Yeah, a little bit ties into that whole how brands started to sponsor athletes and throw out millions and millions of dollars. But
okay, well, super important for people in the racing business. So a movie Air, and then a book Sneaker Wars.
Yeah. So yeah, I went up there and I was responsible for the training business unit. So that is everything like bras and tights, tees and shorts, all kind of athletic wear. And then we had another smaller capsule called athletic. So that was kind of your athleisure at the time. So it was all your sweatshirts, cool kind of street clothes. So it was really building all of the seasonal strategy, working very closely with the team. So it's a German company. And so everything comes down from Germany. And then we have to figure out in the markets how to, make it work, right? So it's taking the kind of each seasonal global strategy and building the plan out, marketing, merchandising, sales, branding, all of that for the individual markets, working with, athletes, grassroots, initiatives, events, activations, that kind of a thing, to get the product out there. And at the time, Adidas, this was right kind of still on the kind of top pinnacle, maybe slightly towards the tail end of the Yeezy, Pharrell kind of crazy, and Adidas had like gone through the roof. So we were really running that or riding that success wave, which was great. So we were working on rebranding all of the apparel to kind of tag along with that. So it was an incredible experience. I had two of the best directors on my team that I still to this day, like I wish I could, take them with me wherever I go. They've, continued to grow in their careers. But, we had actually a small team that had a huge responsibility. But again, it's back to the people. So,
right. Well, I was going to say that I was going to ask a question, and in process of asking the question, I realized that the answer is probably going to be the people. But can I ask you a question, and the people can't be the answer?
Sure.
All right. What are some parallels to the time at Adidas to like current motorsports landscape? Like, I know that when I look at companies like Adidas, one of the things that I see is the I wouldn't necessarily say diversification, but like the extreme targeting of different groups. I remember when I was growing up, it was like, well, like companies like Adidas or Nike, like they had one thing, and it's like, well, I was an overweight black dude. And it's like, but I don't fit that. And, it was probably the same for women too. It was like, I need a bra. Like, are you guys going to make something for us?
Yep.
And, now companies seem to be making stuff for like all different types of markets. Either that could be an example or any sort of example of something that's a parallel between your time at Adidas and what's currently happening in the motorsports landscape, or should be happening in the motorsports landscape.
Yeah, it's interesting, and maybe this is a stretch, but what comes to mind is like Adidas was one company, but it was actually like a million different brands, right? And they all were kind of marching to different drums, and it was so hard to do anything cross-functionally. It was just like, and because it was a German brand, they never quite understood American sport and what American sport does, like really for kids in particular, right? So, athletics and sport are kind of a way out for a lot of kids. It's a way out of, difficult neighborhoods, difficult families, getting them scholarships, et cetera. So what I think about when it comes to motorsport is also the fragmentation of it. And one of the things that is not frustrating, but it's hard as, you kind of get siloed into either one series or the other, or series that like F1 right now is so hot, but it's so prohibitive. You can never ever get involved in F1, and you can barely get involved in NASCAR, IndyCar. And so it's like, how do you communicate to just passionate race fans or even car fans? Like, I have a lot of friends who love cars, and they're like, I don't watch racing. And I'm like, how do you not watch racing? Like, how do you love cars? And how do you not watch some form of motorsport? Because it's cars and people doing the ultimate things, right? So like, how do you not want to watch that? But they just don't. Nothing is inviting them in. And I think what's interesting actually in the drag space and why drag is probably becoming more popular and growing in momentum is because it is accessible and it's done in ways NHRA might be unattainable. But, no prep or street racing or streetcar takeover, that kind of thing, it's very accessible to people. And so I think that's where I'm like, we couldn't make the products and the concepts that were coming down from Germany were not like, they didn't resonate, right? And so I think in some ways motorsport is having that. In some ways there are certain areas that are moving the other way and becoming more attainable and more accessible. But then you have some that are just so, off the charts. It's like, I want to find a way to bring more car communities, motorsport fans together with more commonalities.
Right. Absolutely. So let's talk about that move then from from Adidas to motorsports. Yep. Okay. Tell us about that.
It wasn't directly motorsports yet. It was more cars, kind of, little both. But I ended up, through a friend of mine that worked for me at Tom's, I came and I knew a couple friends that worked there. I joined a company called Omaze. And Omaze we were a fundraising company that used, or sweepstakes fundraiser that used this website as a platform to run really cool sweepstakes for incredible prizes like dream cars, trips, experiences, celebrity things. And so my job was really to come up with the experiences, to find the cars, to come up with, what is the most dream-worthy thing. And through that ended up getting to, buy and drive and shoot and create stories around some of the most, the coolest, most desirable new, cars, special builds with builders like Icon and Ring Brothers and Speedcore, and FJ Company, like just these builds that these are $300,000 builds that you're like, I'll never be able to do this. To VIP trips to the Indy 500 and, meeting just incredible drivers, Pat Long, Justin Bell. There's just like a whole long list of the people that I was able to meet and work with. And the list kind of goes on and on. And so it really was a deep immersion into that space, because what we know about car people is that authenticity is critical. So we needed to really, and I'm as a car person, then the person that was on my team with me, we were the two, car nerds. And so we were really immersed in the car community. We would be out with the cars because we got a lot of mistrust that these sweepstakes weren't real. Like you couldn't win, like, oh, no one's going to win these things. But I'm like, here's the car, here's the actual car. Yeah, the Cars and Coffee that you could, like GT3, like you can actually win this thing. So really spent a lot of time in that space, and that kind of the relationships that I developed and the people I met in that space really kind of pivoted. And I was like, that's it. Like now I kind of have an idea of how I can do this, and met other women through a lot of different channels, but some women both that were on the content creation side to the business side through an incubator program with the Peterson Automotive Museum to, spending time up in Car Week and meeting more people that you're like, I get it now. The doors, like I get where the doors can open for me to exist here somewhere with my, background and skills. So.
Right. Well, what were some of the other roadblocks that you came across and some of the ways that you got past it? Like, I totally get that. A lot of people, they put together these, and when I say put together these programs, I mean like business education programs or whatever, where it's like, yeah, just go start the sweepstakes, like give people's information and yeah, you win. And then you try it and people are like, I'm not giving you my, no.
Yeah.
So, you mentioned that roadblock. What were some of the other roadblocks and some of the things some of the challenges that you had and how you guys overcame those?
I mean, specifically at Omaze, we were trying to do something that no one had done, and something that was kind of at the center of probably two of the most heavily regulated areas of law. So sweepstakes or gaming law, and nonprofit. So it was a little complicated, and so we had to kind of chart our own path. We also would make phone calls to big celebrity, you name one. There's pretty much isn't someone we hadn't worked with, right? And so, and they didn't say this, but the two women that just went up into space with Richard Branson on the Virgin flight, that was an Omaze sweepstakes.
Oh, no way.
They didn't even mention. And so we sent people to space. So it was, we did some really crazy stuff. And in the car world, it was really, I think by being an enthusiast, being an authentic, car lover, and being out in the spaces, people were like, oh, okay, cool. But like, it took a lot of doing. And that's why we had to bring some of these other guys like Justin and, and Vaughn Gittin and all these guys in to like help us authenticate and really tell these stories. But it's every day you're kind of like, okay, we haven't done this before. Let's figure it out, and surround yourself. We hired an incredible creative team, a company called Race Service, that helped us with content and relationships and biz dev. And they work a lot in F1 and IndyCar, and so that it's like surround yourself with good people and just hold on and go.
Yeah, I could see how that could be I'm sorry, I want to tell a joke, but I could see how that could be a challenge. We're like, yeah, we have 2 seats to outer space. So give me your information. Yeah, absolutely. So then from there to Pertronics, how did that come about? And tell us about that.
Yeah. Very serendipitous. This is why, I have a few words of wisdom. One would be like, never burn bridges and keep your relationships good, and, treat people well, because the man who was my president at Tom's, who hired me at Tom's, he didn't stay there long, and he left and he went to become the CEO of Lululemon. And his name is Laurent Poitevin. And we kind of lost touch. We hadn't talked in a while. And he called me, I guess this would have been like the summer of 22. And he called because his fiance is a designer. And he said, hey, I need some help with some apparel stuff. And I was like, I'm so out of that world. Like, I really haven't been, kind of checked into the apparel world. But, and he's like, well, what are you doing? And I said, well, I went through a very difficult loss in 22. So I was taking some time off, But I said, when I do go back to work, I'm only going to go back and work in, automotive and motorsport and something. And he's like, well, that's funny because I'm now going to be the CEO of a company called Pertronics Performance Brands. And I was like, you are? I'm like, so Laurent also comes from apparel. He was at Louis Vuitton, Tom's, Lululemon. I was like, did we talk about cars? Did we it was just such out of the blue. And so long story short, here I am, and it was the perfect time to come on after the company had bought Aeromotive and Pertronics, and a new private equity company had come in. So they brought Laurent in, and he brought myself and Dr. Jamie Meyer, who came out of Chevy Performance and PRI, on. So here we are.
Well, condolences for the loss. I mean, a lot of my story is also based on loss and a loss. So totally send my condolences there. And also thank you for the word of wisdom. We'll definitely cut that up and have that be
don't burn bridges.
No, absolutely. So tell us about the scope now that you're at the Aeromotive Group, and I'll leave that up to you. I mean, talk as long as you want to about the group.
Yeah, it's quite an incredible portfolio of brands, and I know our industry is going through a lot of this. There's a lot of private equity activity happening, and
actually, you know what? Maybe before we go there, and maybe let's speak to that, because I think that may be a thing where I don't necessarily know if people have good or bad feelings about it. It's just it's a new feeling, like it's one of those new phenomenons that's happening in the world of motorsports. For me, I know about it because I know some of the players. Like I know that Jegs got bought by a bigger company. I know that Aeromotive, obviously, the original Aeromotive, and a lot of people. I mean, it's happening in the world in a lot of different industries, and it's just now starting to make its way into motorsports, and people don't really know. They don't really know. What are some of the things that people don't understand, do understand, or the realities of what's happening?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's probably a natural progression in some ways, right? As brands mature, and there's a lot of companies where they're sort of hit their limitation. So you had someone who was, and this happened a lot in apparel. This kind of, I went through this in the apparel world, when you had sort of a creative, or you had maybe in motorsport, you have an engineer, or you have someone that just has a really great idea, and they are able to take it only, to so far. And that it's like at some point, either they're tired and, they're kind of done with it, or they need an infusion of capital to keep it going. And there's so many incredible brands in this industry, and that I think it was probably a natural progression at some point. And then with the economy and just sort of, what's happening after COVID and, all of the crazy supply chain stuff, there was probably more of a interest in selling than there might have been before. People are just like, I'm out, I can't take it anymore. Or they might still be involved, but again, they need some help, they need some infrastructure, they need some, some support. So it's not entirely surprising, I think. And so in some ways it could be good. And then in the other ways, I think the challenges, and this is, I think in any industry, is you oftentimes in private equity, you have a group of people that don't come from that industry. And so they come in with very unrealistic expectations. They don't understand necessarily things like the supply chain timeline, or the end consumer, or the distribution network, or kind of a lot of things that matter in our industries, right? And so then usually the first thing they do is they pull back marketing. They'll pull back spend on things that they find unnecessary. And then that's where you kind of see maybe some of these brands disappearing, because you just are like, well, where did they go? Because no one's talking about them anymore. So it can be a blessing and a curse. And I think it's, and then you have the, buy and sell cycle. And so brands, which has happened to a couple of our brands, right? We're bought and sold. And inevitably, depending on the size of the portfolio, brands are going to get neglected. If you look at it, this is not throwing stones, but you look at a company like Holly that has, I think, over 70 brands. I don't know how they manage to, and I don't think they can, market and talk about every single one. So like, how do you innovate? How do you market? How do you brand when you have that many brands? So it's a little bit of a, can come back and bite you in the ass sometimes too.
No,
I mean, honestly, but yeah, that's kind of the nature of what's happening. So, we're trying to do it right. We have some of the same complexities and some of the same challenges. We have to be really mindful, but Laurent, we call him LP, like he's very much passionate about marketing and product innovation. If we're not innovating and, we're in an innovative industry, I mean, and with the way, look what's happening, right? You have electric, you have hydrogen, you have so many new technologies, you have all of the changing restrictions, and then you also have passionate enthusiasts that we still want to take care of. And so how do you juggle that? Well, you need to innovate, you have to. So we're doing our best to put that out again and kind of revive that way of thinking.
Very awesome. Thank you for being gracious and answering that question. And so tell us a little bit more about what's happening there at the Aeromotive Group, some of the brands, and what are some of the things that we should know?
Yeah. Really cool brands, and not coming from the aftermarket, I knew some of them, but not all of them. And there's just some incredible heritage with these brands. So we have Taylor Cable, which is 100 years this year. Pertronics is over 60 years old. Doug's Headers, same thing. I mean, there's some really incredible, great old photos and content for Doug's. Obviously, Aeromotive turns 30 next year. And then JBA has been around and, was such a loved brand, kind of the Fox body, American muscle space, and has really kind of turned itself into more of a late model brand that has more EOs than any of our competitors. So we're kind of trying to figure out like what each brand, like what each brand stands for, what each brand, like how we move each one forward again, both in terms of product innovation and branding, like who are they to the customer? What can they do to add value? And so I think it's been really fun to work alongside Jamie on the product side and think about kind of how I don't want to say revive, because Aeromotive never went away. It's still a highly desirable brand. And we just came back from Roadkill Nights and it's everywhere and beloved. And then, but how do we revive maybe Taylor? How do we revive JBA and make them modern, make their next chapter? How do you see them put to use by a customer in new ways? So that's really, us leaning into those two areas in marketing and product development and product innovation, and then getting out and really trying to think about the end customer, like what he or she is doing, what are they building, how are they using it, what do they want, what do they need, and that's, it's been fun. I think hasn't really been top of mind with this group, so it's nice to be able to start doing that.
Gotcha. And publicly traded or private company?
Private
Company.
Private.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
From a partnership standpoint, I know that a bunch of the people listening have like race car businesses, their actual racing business. And some of the people that we've had on, they run big brands or have run big brands, and now on the motorsports car racing side of it. What are some of the things that are red flags for you when people are approaching you to be partners? What are some of the things that you like to hear? And not trying to give away the secret sauce, but like help people a little bit to at least get past some of the first steps.
Yeah. I mean, I think for us at this stage, Aeromotive in particular has always kind of been by racers for racers, and they've always taken the approach, like, we're here to help you solve problems. And I know that they have created like one-off parts for people, Steve Matusik, the founder, is a racer. And so it was always his mission to really help solve those problems. Unfortunately, we're not in that position anymore. And so we can't do one-off projects anymore, but we're really passionate about helping people, like finding people that can help us tell our story too, and put our products to the test. So, I mean, this is the sort of less sexy or kind of like, the how the sausage is made comment, but we do need to work with people that have at least a big enough following or enough of a presence in the space or something that, so if we're going to give them parts, for example, they can help shoot content, or they can help, get some photos, they can help us, on the ground at the race, we can be there supporting them. So, but it's not always the case. I mean, there could be someone that has no followers and we're just like super passionate about their driver, their team. If it's an up and coming, we're really starting to explore new forms of drag racing. And we had a call with the Donk Master not too long ago, which I'm just like, this is amazing. Just something that's different, that like, if we can be a part of that, we would love to, but there needs to be some kind of like thought behind, okay, we'll give you this. How do we want to partner? How do we want to show up together? So we don't want to just give you something and disappear, because then we don't help you either, Right. So it's like, we want to help expose all the great stuff that teams and drivers and racers are doing.
What's an example of the worst possible approach that you've had so far?
Oh God. I mean, there's always like, we got random ones through the website. There's like, we need parts, and it, so we get no information. We have no understanding of who they are or why we would give them parts. I'm trying to think of a bad one off the top of my head. That's probably the worst of it. I'm sure some of the guys that have been here longer probably have some good stories. But even being out at Roadkill Nights, we had a really great booth and had only really positive interactions with people. So I guess that, I don't know if that's rare or just lucky, or people love the brand. So it was all good.
That's awesome. Well, yeah. Before we get to the wrap-up segment called Put Up Your Dukes, is there anything else that you want to say, either about your career leading up to this, the different jobs that you had, or anything at Aeromotive Group, or any just random advice that you have before we get into the closing segment?
I think for me, what this experience is doing is really, it's really fulfilling in that I'm in a space that I've loved for so long. At this stage in my career, I'm still learning something, which is so important. I'm meeting more and more people like me. And yes, I would say that's women, but it's also just people that are really creative, really enthusiastic, really want to move this industry forward and feel very passionate about it. And I know there's a lot of headwinds right now when it comes to, especially, like I said, climate and regulations and all of that. But I think there's ways that we can still exist and do it and honor the passion and enthusiasm that we all have for this industry. So it's a platform to be able to seek more people out like that and be able to kind of chart a path that I didn't think I would be in. And so I think for me, it's just exciting, meeting people like Wes, honestly. I think what he's doing is exactly what this industry needs, and taking something like drag racing and like doing this podcast and doing some of the other shows he's doing and trying to bring in more enthusiasts across different series and different segments of the industry. So I think that's what's the fun. Like every day I feel like I'm meeting different people, and encourage, especially young women, like if you have any interest in this, there's a place for you. And it doesn't have to just be young women. If you have an interest, there's a place for you. And it's just, don't give up.
Don't give up. Love it. Well, ready for the final segment, which is called Put Up Your Dukes. It is 13 questions, I believe, or 12 questions. We got 12 rounds. 1 minute answers to each. It's not that's the max is a minute.
Okay.
All right. Doesn't have to be a minimum, but max 1 minute. Time to put up your dukes. Question can be either personally for you or for the industry or for your company. All right.
I'm asking you questions?
No. Oh. Actually, we should do that one time, JP. We'll do that.
Like, okay.
No, final 12 questions. Again, 1 minute. You can either take it from the perspective of you personally, or the company, or the industry.
Okay.
All right. First, we'll just start out with the SWOT analysis. So strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats as 4 separate questions. So first is strength.
Strength. I would say I didn't really know strength until what I went through last year. And it is just, it sounds so cliche, and I'm so not a Pollyanna type person. Like I definitely am not, but you gotta just, you can do it, like the worst possible things is you can do it, and you'll get to the other side. Like it seems impossible, but whether it's from a personal side or the job side or what have you, you can do it.
Gotcha. Weakness, either for you, Aeromotive Group, or the industry.
I think the industry, the weakness is, again, it's this siloed approach, and we need to find more commonalities, and we need to get back to the days where you could follow, Mario Andretti or Dan Gurney or someone racing across all the different series, and it's not dictated by commercial or TV rights or what have you. Like, I think we need to really bring more people together in different segments and figure out how we can get more people involved.
Okay. Well, that's probably also the opportunity, but I'll still ask you the question, opportunity.
I think the opportunity is still with getting more women and diversity, people of color, women into the sport, into this industry. It just brings more diversity of thought and different approaches. And just like any other industry, we need more of it.
Yeah. Threat.
I think, I was going to go.
Go there. Go there. Wherever that is, go there.
At the risk of like opening a can of worms, I do think the regulatory climate is a huge threat. I say that not because I don't care about the environment or don't do other things to, do my part for climate change, but I do think that there's a lot of heavy-handedness that we are experiencing that we should not be. It's things that we should not. Yeah, I'll leave it at that. I think that's going to, like, the creativity that's going to be needed to be able to keep this sport, keep this passion moving forward in a time of a lot of uncertainty.
Yeah. Well, look, it's better to talk about it than not talk about it. I think we're probably in the place where we are because we don't talk about it.
It's true. This is true.
Biggest mental hurdle.
It's, as someone that I've been espousing confidence a lot, and I think there's still that little voice, some days where if I don't know exactly what I'm doing, I'm like, what am I doing? What am I doing? And it's that constant sort of battle. I'm like, well, you didn't come from this space, so why are you here? And then you have to sort of, again, talk yourself through it. So it's that questioning, that constant questioning that I have to keep talking myself through.
Yeah, not that there's an interview thing of me, but I find myself sometimes, like, I'll be driving for an hour, like, trying to convince myself that I'm a racer, because one of the things that, like, goes through my head is like, you're not a racer. And it's like, dude, you spent 30 years on a racetrack, bro. Like,
Yep. No, it's true. We're our own minds are our biggest strength and our worst enemy.
Most overrated.
Oh, here we
Part
go
of
again.
part of your life, part of your job, part of the industry.
I was gonna go there again. I'm gonna get myself into trouble.
Go. We could always edit it out. We won't edit it out.
Teslas fucking kill me. Like, just I support innovation and electrifying cars is part of that innovation, but Teslas are just terrible. They're terrible. They're all over the place, and it's just like they're not well made, and the whole kind of cult of Tesla. So overhyped.
Most underrated.
Good question. Most underrated. I should be able to easily answer this question, but for some reason I'm struggling.
That's the point of this podcast. This is not answers that you already have.
Okay. I mean, without being cliche, I would say our portfolio of brands. I think, and it was a surprise to me at, how great they are. So I think just keep an eye out.
Nice. Last thing that you have to say to people younger than you.
I already said my don't burn bridges. I think the other thing that I've learned, and maybe because my path has been so, again, non-linear, that don't be afraid to try new things. Don't, and I think it's a little more acceptable now than maybe when I was going through school and college and you need to have a career and you need to just follow this path. And I've had so many, I feel like multiple careers, not just jobs. And I think it's been, at this point, I can look back and say it's a blessing. And so don't be afraid and box yourself in because you think you're supposed to take this path. And I would say that part of that too is sometimes take a job that you think maybe doesn't make sense or isn't exactly in line with where you want to go, because you're probably going to learn something along the way, and it could very well take you and connect you with something else. So it's just, put your head down and do the job and learn as much as you can. And then, keep on your path.
How about to the people older than you that went before us?
Oh, amen. And thank you. It's like and I look at, I've gotten to be good friends. She's not that much older. She'll kill me if she hears this, but like Cindy Sisson, who's working with Beth Peretta and Lynn St. James. And, there's a movement to really bring more women into this industry. But I think not just women, but just the people that continue to put forward the passion, and the absolute love of cars and the love that will keep this industry alive. And I think it's, we look now, I look now to them, and we look at, it's like history is now going to kind of come back around and we can innovate on it. So I'm grateful for all of those that charted the path ahead.
Nice. And to your peers?
Let's come together. Let's do this together. I think I will say that I find most of the time we are able, if you're at a Cars and Coffee or you're out in a race or you're somewhere, that cars are the things that unite. But sometimes that still is difficult, right? And so I'm like, we're all here for the common reason that we want to move this industry forward and this passion forward. Let's do that together, whether that's, whether it's financial and, restrictions because motorsports is very expensive, whether it's diversity, whether it's, it's like, there should be no room for politics in racing. It should just be like, let's do it for the good of it, right? Let's do it for the love of it and bring together as many people that want to be a part of it.
Yep. When Sarah Lassek is not in the room, what do you hope people say?
I hope that they will say that I'm setting a good example, that I'm not afraid to do this. That they might say, thank God she finally is in that industry, because she's been talking about it for a really long time. But she's with her people.
Yeah. Well, awesome. Yeah. Well, thank you for being a guest on Drag Illustrated's The Racing Business. I wish you well, both for you and for the industry. I can't wait to see all the things that you continue to do for the industry.
Thank you, Jason. I really enjoyed the time. I appreciate you guys inviting me on.
Same here. Well, we look forward to definitely working with you more in the future and supporting. I think I fit into the group of peers. So yeah, let's absolutely collaborate.
Absolutely. Thank you.
We love having you on.
Okay.
Good deal. All right, guys, that's another episode of Drag Illustrated's The Racing Business. We're brought to you by Racers Club and Drag Illustrated. I'm your host, Jason Dukes, and we're produced by JT Murder Tundra Hudson. We'll see you for the next episode. Take care.